Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 4. Can you believe it's already week 4 of this summer class? This seems like it's going by so fast. So this week we're going to talk about confession. And I've got a couple of things that I want to raise, just housekeeping things first, and then we'll get into, I'll talk a little bit about the readings. Later, I'm going to post another video kind of addressing the history of confession. So I'll probably post that tomorrow, I think. I hope everything's going well. If you have any questions, comments, problems, please email me, let me know what's going on. As far as grades, you should have gotten your grades back on your Sabbath keeping posts by now. And overall, I was impressed. I thought you did better than my last quarter class, and so I was happy to see that. What I think is I gave a grade range between 3s and 5. I gave 1 5, only one. And for the most part, you know, the grades are 1 through 5 on these posts. Oh, it's crazy. Okay, so the grades are 1 through 5. And 5 means that, you know, you really hit the mark. Doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement, but that you're doing well. As far as the 3s are concerned, that means that you probably, I think the only 3 that I gave was someone who turned in their assignment late. So as far as the 4s are concerned, most of you got 4s, and I was pretty generous because probably next week I will be looking for more from you. But for the most part, what I'm looking for, as you know, is a discussion of the readings and then an application of the readings and the concepts that we're talking about to your own life. So it's not just a post where you're just reflecting on your own life and what's going on or what you did or, you know, how you felt about what you did. That is all really good. But I also want you to discuss the readings because I want to make sure that you are actually absorbing what we're learning, what we're talking about, what we're reading about, and then applying it to your own life. And I know that this feels artificial, you know, on the one hand, I'm like asking you to reflect and you're opening, and for the most part, you guys did really, really well on reflecting, on being honest with yourself, on being honest in terms of talking about, you know, what's going on with you and your relationship with God. And I'm so pleased. I'm really excited to see that you're all doing that. So that's very exciting and wonderful. But at the same time, what we're asking and what Fuller is really asking you to do in these posts is to think about the readings and the video viewings and what we're talking about in class and apply that to yourself. And so I know that this can feel kind of artificial, but realistically, it's really what you would be doing as a pastor. And I believe it's what you would be doing as a psychologist as well. So for those of you who are going to the School of Psychology. So what we're trying to do here is take this theory, maybe theology, maybe scripture, whatever the theory is, and apply it to your own circumstance, your own life. And hopefully a pastor would be doing this. I think the really good pastors do this. They take this scripture, whatever they're going to talk about that week, and they look at how it impacts them, how it plays out in their life. And that gives them a window into how they can help others, how they can open up the scripture for others. And really the same thing for psychologists, right? I think is what you guys are doing, is reading the theory and then applying the theory to yourself to kind of get a sense of where you stand with it, and then it gives you an insight into how to help others. So this is the rationale behind these posts, and I apologize if it feels awkward, but by the end of the class, you'll get the hang of it. You'll be like, no problem, I've got this handled. So what I'm asking you to do is make sure that you get into those readings and really analyze them, pull out the kernels of wisdom in these readings that you can then apply to your own life. So in that regard, we have 2 books to talk about this week. And the first is Life Together by Bonhoeffer. Now, if you have not read Dietrich Bonhoeffer before, what a treat to be able to read him. He is an amazing writer, an amazing person, had an amazing life. Okay, how many times can I say amazing? Sorry, guys. But if you don't know that much about Bonhoeffer, I really encourage you to read the introduction. I know I didn't require the introduction, but I really encourage you to get some. It's short, and it gives you just some sense of his life and what he was living under. I mean, it's no secret, of course, that he was a German Christian living under Hitler. And one thing that I thought I would bring to your attention, because I think it's so profound, and maybe has applications to our situation today. But anyway, when his friend was talking about Bonhoeffer living under Hitler and under that regime, and Bonhoeffer's, Bonhoeffer had opportunities to come to the United States, to escape, to get away from the situation, and instead Bonhoeffer chose to stay in Germany and try to affect change. And what his friend said about this is, not that Bonhoeffer believed that everybody must do as he did, stay and try to make change, but from where Bonhoeffer was standing, he could see no possibility of retreat into any sinless, righteous, pious refuge. Bonhoeffer could have gone off to the United States and been like, I'm not touching that nastiness over there. I'm going to be sinless and pious and holy and escape. And instead, he said, the sin of respectable people reveals itself in flight from responsibility. So he saw this incredible responsibility to stay despite the challenges, and of course things did not go well for him in the end of his life. So definitely take a look at the introduction, and then take a look at the chapter that I've asked you to look at, which is on confession and communion, chapter 5. We are going to be reading more of this book. I haven't assigned the entire book. Of course, in an ideal world, we'd be reading the entire book. But for this week, we're just reading chapter 5. And what I've done is I've done a set of 4 questions to try to help you get into the reading. I know sometimes it's like, oh, I don't have time to do this reading, but maybe if you've got these questions to look at, that will give you a window into getting into the reading so that you can include this reading into your posts. So the 4 questions that I've asked you is, why does Bonhoeffer think confession is so important for Christians? Why are our Christian brothers and sisters, sorry about his, anachronistic use of masculinist language, sexist language, but anyway, why are our Christian brothers and sisters important to us in our Christian walk vis-a-vis confession? Why is confession important to the church and Christian community? And how does our Christian brother or sister give us certainty of forgiveness? So those are the 4 questions. I will post this on Canvas so you can see. And I've given you little hints. I've actually given you page numbers to take a look at so that you know where to go with these. You don't have to answer these questions in your posts. This is just a way for you to get into the reading and really see what Bonhoeffer is talking about so that you know how you can take some of what he said and apply it into your post. Now, the other really, really important thing that Bonhoeffer does that I want you to pay attention to is on page 118, where he asks the question, to whom confess, or in other words, to whom shall we make confession? And what he says is, according to Jesus' promise, every Christian brother or sister can hear the confession of another. And then he asks this really important question, but will he understand? May he not be so far above us in his Christian life that he would only turn away from us with no understanding of our personal sins? And so then what he's saying is, you don't want this pious, holier-than-thou person to be your confession partner. And what he says is, instead what you want is anybody who lives beneath the cross and who has discerned in the cross of Jesus the utter wickedness of all men and of his own heart will find there is no sin that can ever be alien to him. So what's he saying there? What he's saying is, you want to find someone who gets it, who understands they're not perfect. They've got problems. They've committed sins. And so they're not going to turn to you and say, you did that? Really? I would never have done that. Oh, poor you. Instead, you want someone who says, I get it. I've been there. I know what you're talking about. So this is who you want to be looking for when you have your conversation of confession. So what I've done to aid you in that and to really help you select the appropriate person to make this conversation. And some of you may say, I know exactly who I would have this conversation with. And it may be your spouse, it may be your best friend, it may be your mother, it may be someone who's really close to you and who really gets you. And it may not, take you any time to think of who would you have this conversation with. But for others, you may have to think a while about who would it be that I would have this conversation with. And so to aid you in that regard, I've posted a Huffington Post article written by Brené Brown. Now, Brené Brown has become quite famous in the past 2 or 3 years, particularly because of her connection with Oprah. But Brené is the real deal. She's a social worker. She's a researcher at the University of Houston. And the other really important thing to know about Brené is she is a Christian. And I think that her position as a Christian shines through her writing and shines through this article that I've posted for you. She's talking about finding someone to talk to in terms of shame. And shame is not unrelated to what we are doing here in confession, because really your confessional conversation may involve guilt, your own guilt over something that you have done in the past, or it may involve shame in terms of just feeling bad about who you are. And so either one of those are appropriate for this conversation. Now, I want to be clear about this conversation. I don't want anybody to feel like they have to confess something that they don't want to confess. You may have held something deep in your heart that you have told no one or told very, very few people for years, and you may feel like, oh, this is a really good time for me to get this off my chest. Or you may think, no way, I am not bringing this up. I'm not ready to talk about this. And that is perfectly fine with me. I am not here to push you to have any conversation that you're not ready to have. I want you guys to think through and be prepared to talk about what you want to talk about, what you feel like you can talk about, but don't feel like you need to go anywhere near something that you're not prepared to talk about yet. Now, the other thing about this conversation, as one of my students brought up for me, is this may be confession of something that you have done, but it also may be a confession of something that was done to you. And that is fair game as well. And that can contribute or may not contribute to your sense of shame about yourself, depending on how deep-seated and how serious this thing was that was done to you. But all of that is appropriate to bring before God and before our Christian brother or sister. So Bonhoeffer, really important. Make sure you take a look at the Brene Brown article before you have this conversation so that you know who you are, that you've chosen someone who really gets you and who will walk alongside you and will not judge you. Now, the other reading that I wanted to talk about is Madame Guyon. And you may be saying, who is this person and why are we reading this person? So Madame Guyon, I've posted a PowerPoint on, just a brief PowerPoint because I've taught on Madame Guyon before. I've posted a PowerPoint on Canvas for you to take a look at. And so Madame Guyon was born in 1648 in France. You may be wondering, is this appropriate? Is she a Catholic? What is she? I think technically she was a Catholic, but she influenced a lot of Protestants, including John Wesley, the early Quakers, and Kierkegaard. By the way, she is on the Fuller approved list of readings for this class, and Dallas Willard was a big fan of Madame Guyon. So for those of you who are big fans of Dallas Willard, you may want to really read this carefully to figure out, okay, what did Dallas Willard see in Madame Guyon? Why was she important? Now, I've also posted 4 important questions to kind of help you get into Madame Guyon, but I'm kind of going to address some of these questions as I go along. So the 2 primary questions that I've posted that I want you to think about is who should do self-examination before confession, and then who should lay their soul open to God. Now, obviously, for our purposes, you should do both of those things before you go in to have your confessional conversation, right? You want to do a little bit of self-examination, try to figure out what it is that you want to talk about and what it is you're prepared to talk about. But absolutely spend some time in prayer and lay your soul open to God and say, okay, God, what is it that you want to bring up for me in this conversation? What is it that you want me to talk about? Now, what Madame Guyon does, though, interestingly, so I think she raises really important things to talk about and to think about. But what she does is she's really kind of thinking of in terms of a 2-tier Christianity, which we generally don't think about very much anymore. But I think there's a lot to be learned about through thinking this way. She's thinking of the first tier being those of us who, are just establishing our relationship with Christ. We may still be kind of working through who we are in God and in prayer, and we haven't really championed this really close relationship that she envisions that you can have with Christ through prayer. And so I think what she's saying is, for those of us who can directly encounter God in our prayers, then there is a sense that God confesses us, rather than that we're confessing to him or we're confessing to a Christian person, brother or sister, that God enters our soul, works on us, and helps us to see what we need to work on. But he does a lot of the changes, and he brings this deep love into our hearts for us no matter what. And so I think it's really important to think about what is she talking about here? And isn't this amazing that God can confess us? Now, a word about the scripture that I've assigned, John chapter 1-4. First of all, who doesn't want to read John chapters 1-4? I mean, they're just amazing. The entire thing is amazing. You've got Nathaniel, the whole thing. You've got to love John chapter 1-4. So, but there's a lot of confession going on there that's not obvious, and that I think is more tied to what Madame Guyon is talking about. You've got, kind of John the Baptist confessing who he is, and that's part of what our confession is us getting to the core of who we are, who is our inner self. And so you've got this lovely beginning where John the Baptist comes out and says who he is, and then you kind of move into Jesus showing people who they are in terms of Jesus's conversation with Nathaniel, Jesus's conversations with the other disciples. And then it culminates in Jesus's really significant conversation with the woman at the well. And there, I think Jesus is doing exactly what Madame Guyon is doing. Jesus sees right into the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman's life, and tells her she's already had 4 husbands. She's living with the 5th. He's not her husband. And she's like, oh my God, you know me. And there's a sense that Jesus can see into us and can know us and can confess us without us having to confess him, that I think Madame Guyon captures, and I think that's exactly what's going on in John chapter 4. So that's why you may at first read John chapters 1 through 4 and go, what is she talking about here? There's no confession here. But really, I think there's a lot of confession here. So read it with that lens on. So anyway, I've gone on long enough. If you have any questions, please, please, please email me. I know that this is a tender topic. This is kind of a tough one this week. So I think that you will be, Yolanda is going to be available to work with you. She may be trying to set up a conversation. I am definitely available for any questions, any comments, anything that you have going on. Feel free to email me, post a question on the question forum, or, I'd love to hear from you. Good luck. I hope this goes well. God bless, and stay in touch. I'll see you soon.